He was the boy no one noticed, until he ran into a burning house to save the child of the very people who had forgotten him. This is the story of Samba. The sky turned orange. It wasn't sunset. It was fire, raging, hungry, alive. Smoke curled into the evening sky like black ghosts rising from the heart of the Miller family's home. The peaceful quiet of the neighborhood shattered as sirens blared in the distance, dogs barked, and people spilled out of their houses in panic and disbelief. Flames erupted from the windows like wild beasts, roaring with heat and fury. They clawed at the walls, licking up the sides of the house like they were trying to swallow it whole. It had all happened so fast. One moment, the street was calm. The next, chaos. People stood frozen on sidewalks, mouths open, cell phones trembling in their hands. Some shouted, others just stared. A few called for help, but no one dared to go near. The fire was too big, the heat too real, too close. But one boy didn't just watch. Barefoot, standing in the middle of the street, was 12-year-old Samba. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but something deeper. Determination. A kind of silent bravery that didn't need to be loud to be real. His tiny chest rose and fell quickly, his breath catching in the smoke-heavy air. The orange glow from the flames danced across his dark skin, making him look like a shadow between two worlds, one of fear and one of action. He knew that house. Everyone did. The Miller family lived there. Nice car, perfect lawn, bright porch lights that never seemed to go out. A picture-perfect family, or at least that's how they looked. Mr. and Mrs. Miller were respected in town. Always well-dressed, always polite. Their son, Luke, went to the same school as Samba, same grade even. But that's where the similarities ended. The Millers didn't really know Samba. They'd seen him, sure, maybe waved once or twice, but they never really saw him. Never asked about his day, never invited him to birthday parties, never offered rides when it rained. They didn't say anything cruel, but they didn't say anything at all. Samba lived just a few streets away, in a crumbling apartment complex that most people pretended not to notice. His mom worked at the diner all day and cleaned offices at night. He had no dad, no fancy clothes, no big backyard to play in, but he had sharp eyes, a quiet heart, and a courage few had ever seen. And now that quiet courage was about to be tested. Samba's gaze locked on the second-floor window of the burning house. Through the thick smoke, he thought he heard something, a faint cry, a child's voice, panic. It was Luke. A wave of heat hit him in the face, but he didn't step back. His bare feet pressed against the hot pavement, but he didn't flinch. Around him, adults were yelling, some filming, some calling the fire department, some just holding their heads in disbelief, but none of them moved. Samba's mind raced. He remembered something. An old basement window on the side of the house. He'd seen it once during a game of hide-and-seek when he'd passed by after school. It had always been half open, too small for an adult, but just enough for someone like him. As the flames roared louder and the screams inside the house grew, more desperate, Samba did something no one else did. He ran toward the fire, not because anyone asked him to, not because someone told him to, but because he couldn't bear to hear a child scream and do nothing. And in that moment, the boy they had all forgotten became the only one they'd remember. Samba lived just 2 streets away from the Miller family's grand house, but his world couldn't have been more different. His home was a small, worn-down apartment on the corner of a block most people avoided. The paint on the walls had long since faded and peeled away. Rainwater dripped from a leak in the ceiling that no landlord ever bothered to fix. The heater rattled in the winter, and the fan groaned in the summer. But it was home. It was all he had. Samba's mother worked nearly every hour the clock had. Mornings. At the diner and nights cleaning office buildings downtown. She left early, came home late, and still somehow found time to kiss him on the forehead when he was half asleep. His father had been gone for years. No goodbye, no explanation, just vanished, like he had never existed. But Samba didn't let that harden him. He didn't have much, but he had heart. He remembered a moment, brief, small, but impossible to forget. It was during a school play in 2nd grade. He was standing backstage, nervous, in a wrinkled costume that didn't quite fit. As he peeked around the curtain, he saw Luke Miller, sitting in the front row with his parents. Luke had turned and smiled at him. Just once. A simple, kind smile. But then Luke's parents saw Samba too. And in an instant, they pulled Luke back toward them, whispering something in his ear, their faces tightening. They never smiled. They never looked again. Samba was never invited to the Millers' parties, even though he lived close. He wasn't included in the games after school or the weekend barbecues. When he passed the Millers on the sidewalk, they looked past him like he was invisible. And when his family was evicted for a month, forced to live with cousins in an even smaller space, no one, not even the Millers, checked in or asked if he was okay. Samba was used to being forgotten. But now, something shattered that silence. Through the smoke and the roar of flames, he heard it. A voice, high-pitched, scared, a child's scream for help. It was Luke, the boy whose family had never truly seen Samba, the boy now trapped inside a burning house no one could reach. And Samba was the only one listening. "Someone help! My son is inside!" Mrs. Miller's voice tore through the crowd like a blade, raw and broken. She thrashed against the grip of two firefighters who held her back from the blaze. Her face, usually calm and composed, was now streaked with tears and panic. Her screams echoed through the neighborhood, but they were drowned by the crackling roar of the fire consuming her home. The flames had already swallowed the staircase. The front door was impassable. Smoke billowed from every window, dark and thick like storm clouds. No one moved. No one could. But Samba didn't think. He didn't wait. He moved. Without a word, he darted across the street, his small legs pounding against the pavement. He didn't hear the gasps from the crowd. He didn't hear the firefighter yelling after him. All he could hear was the sound of a child crying from within the fire. Luke. Samba dashed to the side of the house, ignoring the blistering heat that seemed to claw at his skin. He remembered something. An old, cracked basement window hidden behind a hedge. He'd seen Luke climb out of it once during a game of hide-and-seek years ago. Adults couldn't fit through it, but a small boy could. Him. He found the window just where he remembered. The glass was already broken from the heat. He brushed the shards away with his sleeve, wincing as it tore through the fabric. Without hesitation, he dropped to the ground and squeezed inside. "Hey, stop!" someone shouted behind him. "Kid, get out of there!" But Samba was already sliding through. Inside, the world changed. It was pitch dark and suffocating. Smoke clung to the air like thick fog, making it almost impossible to see. Every breath burned his throat. His eyes watered and stung. The heat was unbearable. Samba dropped low to the ground, crawling on his elbows, coughing with every breath. He moved by instinct, one hand forward, one knee at a time. He followed the sound, the faint sobs, the coughing. A child's voice, weak, afraid. He found Luke curled up in the far corner of the room. His arms covered his head. His body was shaking. "Luke!" Samba rasped. "It's me, Samba!" Luke looked up, dazed and confused. He blinked through the smoke, and recognition slowly spread across his face. "You came," Luke whispered. Samba nodded. "I'm gonna get you out." Luke didn't argue. He didn't ask why. He simply reached out. In that moment, fear melted into something softer. Trust. A bond forged not by parties or handshakes, but by fire, and a courage no one had expected from a boy they'd never truly seen. Carrying Luke was not easy. He was only a few pounds lighter than Samba, but in the middle of thick smoke and rising flames, it felt like trying to lift a mountain. Samba could barely see. The smoke swirled around them like a choking blanket. Each breath burned his lungs. Every step was a fight. The heat was unbearable, and the floor trembled beneath them as the house groaned in pain. But Samba didn't stop. He didn't have a plan. He didn't know if they'd make it, but he knew one thing: he had to try. Because no one else was coming for Luke, and if he didn't get him out, no one would. "Keep your head down," Samba coughed, pulling Luke close against his chest as they moved. He used his arms, his legs, and even his back to shield Luke from the smoke and falling debris. The boy clung to him silently, too scared to speak. The flames had already reached the far wall, creeping closer like hungry creatures. Sparks rained down from above. The room was turning into a furnace. Inch by inch, breath by breath, Samba dragged them both across the room, back toward the tiny basement window that had been their only hope. He was sweating, coughing, eyes barely open. His arms were beginning to give out, his legs shaking. But still, he moved. Above them, the ceiling cracked. The sound was like thunder, sharp and final. The support beam overhead groaned, then split, sending splinters and ash falling down like a warning. The house didn't have much time left. Finally, they reached the window. Samba wiped the sweat and soot from his face, blinking hard. He grabbed the edge of the wall and began lifting Luke up, using every ounce of strength he had left. "Push, Luke! Climb!" he urged. Luke scrambled, trying to help. Outside, he could hear shouting, voices, sirens, panic, and then hands. Strong hands reached through the window and grabbed Luke, pulling him to safety. Samba smiled weakly, a flicker of relief washing over his face, but just as he tried to follow, a loud crack sounded behind him. The beam gave way. It crashed onto the floor just inches from where he had been moments earlier. Flames surged up with a roar, cutting him off from the window. The smoke thickened instantly, blinding him. The air became too thick to breathe. Samba stumbled back, coughing violently. Struggling to see, he tried to move forward again, but his body gave out. His legs buckled. His arms fell limp. He was stuck. The room spun, then faded into darkness. His thoughts slowed. All he could think about was that Luke was safe, that he had done something that mattered. And in those final moments of consciousness, surrounded by smoke and silence, Samba felt no fear, only peace. They found Samba minutes later, unconscious but alive. His tiny body was bruised and burned, but his spirit had done what no one else dared. The flames had roared around him like a fierce beast, but Samba had faced them without hesitation. In the midst of chaos and fear, the boy who had long been overlooked became the one who saved a life. The town was silent, the kind of silence that swells with awe and disbelief. For years, Samba had been invisible to many, the quiet boy with curious eyes who blended into the background, the one whose laughter was often drowned out by louder voices. No one really saw him, or if they did, they didn't stop to know him. But in a single brave moment, Samba showed the town something it had forgotten. The Millers stood by his hospital bed, their hearts heavy with guilt and gratitude. Tears streamed down their faces, not just for their son's fragile condition, but for the years they had unknowingly looked past him. They had forgotten Samba, but he had never forgotten kindness. He had remembered what it meant to care, to be brave, and to love. Samba had run into the fire to save his neighbor, old Mrs. Reynolds, whose frail body could not escape the burning house on her own. The flames had spread quickly, engulfing the small wooden frame in smoke and heat. While the adults panicked, calling for help and trying to douse the fire, Samba's heart had fixed on one thing: Mrs. Reynolds. The neighbors who watched from the street could barely breathe as they saw the boy darting toward the inferno. It was madness, some whispered. But Samba didn't think of fear. He thought only of Mrs. Reynolds's kind smile and the times she had baked him cookies, told him stories, and wrapped him in warm blankets during cold winters. Samba found her in the back room, coughing and weak. He lifted her fragile frame, carrying her through the thick smoke and choking air. His arms burned, his legs trembled, but he didn't stop until they were both safely outside. Only then did he collapse, the heat and smoke overwhelming his small body. The story of Samba, the little black boy who ran into the fire, spread quickly, across the town, the state, and then far beyond. Not simply because of what he did, but because of what he reminded everyone of: the true meaning of courage, heart, and love for others, no matter who they are. Schools held assemblies to honor his bravery. Newspapers ran his picture, celebrating the quiet boy who became a hero. Yet Samba didn't see himself as a hero. He just did what he thought was right. His teacher said, "He has a spirit that shines brighter than any flame." His friends said, Samba is the bravest kid we know. The Millers, who once barely noticed his small victories, now saw him in a new light. They held his hand in the hospital, promising to always see him, to always listen, and to never let him feel invisible again. The town, too, began to change. Doors that had once been closed to Samba and children like him slowly opened. People started to remember that every child, every person, deserves kindness and respect. In that moment, with his bruised body resting but his spirit soaring, Samba taught everyone a lesson that no fire could burn away. He showed that true strength isn't just about muscles or loud voices. It's about the courage to care, to act, and to love without boundaries. And for the town, the state, and beyond, Samba's story wasn't just about a boy who ran into a fire. It was about the boy who reminded the world of what truly matters. In a world that sometimes forgets the quiet ones, the poor ones, the different ones. Remember Malik, the boy who didn't wait to be seen, but chose to see others. The boy who ran into the fire, not for applause, not for thanks, but because it was the right thing to do.